July 9, 2024. A date that shattered the tranquility of Bushey, a quiet town just north of London. In a brutal and shocking attack, a man armed with a crossbow and a knife murdered 3 women, a mother, Carol Hunt, and her 2 daughters, Louise and Hannah. The motive, investigators would later reveal, was rooted in a dark and terrifying place: misogyny and the bitter aftermath of a broken relationship. This is the story of a devastating crime, a desperate manhunt, and the chilling consequences of unchecked rage. The victims, Carol Hunt, 61, and her daughters Louise, 25, and Hannah, 28, were the wife and daughters of John Hunt, a well-known BBC sports commentator. Their lives were violently cut short in a horrifying attack that sent shockwaves through their community and the wider nation. The details that would emerge painted a grim picture of a targeted and brutal assault. The alarm was raised when John Hunt returned home to find a scene of unimaginable horror. Police were immediately called to the address, where they discovered the lifeless bodies of his wife and daughters. The presence of both a crossbow and a knife at the scene indicated a premeditated and savage attack. The immediate priority for law enforcement was to secure the scene, identify the victims, and launch a full-scale investigation to apprehend the perpetrator. The investigation quickly focused on Louise Hunt's former partner, Kyle Clifford, a 26-year-old former soldier. Their relationship had recently ended, and sources close to the family revealed a history of difficulties and potential animosity following the breakup. Clifford became the primary suspect, and authorities launched an urgent manhunt to locate him, fearing he posed a continued threat.
Police were called to a property in Ashland Close just before 7 p.m. last night. Officers attended alongside colleagues from the East of England Ambulance Service and, on arrival, found 3 women with serious injuries. Sadly, despite their best efforts, the women, who are believed to be related, died a short time later at the scene. The victims are aged 25, 28 and 61. Our overarching objective today is to protect public safety and to locate Kyle Clifford, who is wanted in connection with the murder of the 3 women in what we believe is a targeted incident.
The women were found at 7 p.m. last night with fatal injuries at their neat detached house in a quiet cul-de-sac in Bushey, Hertfordshire. They had apparently been tied up and shot with a crossbow and attacked with other weapons as well. It's understood the victims are a mother and her 2 daughters. The mother has been named locally as Carol Hunt, aged 61, and her daughters were 25 and 28 respectively. It's believed there is another sister. Carol's husband, John Hunt, father of the girls, is a BBC 5 Live racing correspondent. He is said to have found his wife and daughters with their terrible injuries at their home and called 999. Police have named 26-year-old Kyle Clifford in connection with this dreadful incident. It's thought he may have been a former boyfriend of one of the daughters, who have not yet been formally identified at this stage. There was an armed operation this morning when officers burst into a house, which is where Clifford apparently lives in the Enfield area. The suspicion is that Clifford totally lost the plot and murdered these poor women after turning up at their house yesterday at some point. Neighbours in Ashland Close have told how a fleet of police cars and ambulances turned up there after the 999 call was apparently made by John Hunt. Locals were warned by officers to stay in their homes, and they are clearly shocked by what has happened in their quiet community. The family are all professionals, as well as John being a BBC correspondent. Both daughters run their own small businesses, one apparently selling cosmetics and the other grooming dogs. Police and paramedics tried in vain to save the three victims, but they were all pronounced dead at the scene. Detective Superintendent Rob Hall, who is leading the inquiry, said with some understatement that it was incredibly difficult for the family of the women to deal with. The inquiry is being carried out by the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit. The unit is an amalgamation of experienced detectives from all three forces. They will be looking into Clifford's background and speaking to associates. Police have not disclosed any potential motive for the murders, but such cases are invariably domestic in nature, with victims known to their attacker. The Sun has been informed that one of the daughters was in a relationship with Clifford up to the end of last year and that he took it very badly when they broke up. Either way, the killer of these poor women must have had a serious grudge to do something so diabolical.
A widespread manhunt was launched across Hertfordshire and the surrounding areas. Police appealed to the public for any information regarding Clifford's whereabouts. The fact that a crossbow was used in the attack added a further layer of concern, given its potential for lethal force and the unusual nature of its use in such a crime. The following day, the intense search led authorities to a cemetery in Enfield, North London. There, they located Kyle Clifford. As officers moved in to apprehend him, Clifford turned the crossbow on himself, firing a bolt into his chest. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, with paramedics rushing to the scene to treat his life-threatening injury. Clifford survived the self-inflicted crossbow injury, but the consequences were severe. The bolt severed his spinal cord, leaving him paralyzed from the chest down. Despite his critical condition, he was taken into custody and eventually charged with the murders of Carol, Louise, and Hannah Hunt, as well as other related offenses. His physical state would significantly impact the subsequent legal proceedings.
Do you accept, Kyle, that based on the evidence, that this is a premeditated murder of three people?
No comment.
Do you accept that you have meticulously planned this murder from the moment that you split up Louise?
No comment.
From the moment that she sent you that text message at the end of June, you began to plan her murder? Yes?
No comment.
It's evident quite clearly from your purchase of the crossbow, from your purchase of the additional bolts, from the purchase of the gun and the knife in the 2 weeks leading up to the murders. Do you agree?
No comment.
Do you agree that it shows that you only had one thing in mind, and that planning began when you purchased these items? You purchased rope and you purchased duct tape in order to restrain Louise and Hannah and Carol, didn't you?
No comment.
5-6 days before this happened, you make these significant purchases that really only have one plausible explanation, didn't you?
No comment.
The only plausible explanation is that they were purchased in order for you to carry out these murders. Do you agree?
No comment.
You got to the address and you came well prepared. You came prepared with Louise's belongings, didn't you?
No comment.
Louise's belongings were your ticket into that address. Yes?
No comment.
You deceived your way into that address at the front door with Carol, pretending that you were having a civil and friendly conversation, and returning Louise's property, and you'd even written out a thank you card. Yes?
No comment.
Next thing I'd like to speak to you about, Kyle, is some more information, some more evidence that we've obtained from the download of your mobile phone. So on the mobile phone, in the notes section, there is a note which is titled Last Letter, and it's written to different family members as individual paragraphs addressed to each individual family member. This item was created on the 26th of June, and the last modification was on the 7th of July. The opening part of the note reads as such: "Please don't think of this as me throwing my life away. I have lived, and I am grateful for everything and everyone that has been a part of it. It is now my time to leave and be at peace, as this is what I ultimately want. I know you will all have so many questions and wish you could have done something different to prevent this. However, none of you have failed, and there is simply nothing any of you could have done. This is my decision to just be at peace. You all have to take care of each other and speak to each other, as that will be the best thing for you all. I love you all so much." You okay, Carl? Carry on. When you wrote that note, had you already planned the murders of Louise, Carol and Hannah? So I'm interested in the words "prevent this." So tell me what you mean by "prevent this."
No comment.
Do you mean the murders of Carol, Hannah and Louise?
No comment.
The next note is addressed to myself. "I don't want to live my life without her. I don't want to experience new things. Nothing I can think of can make me happy. I know I could have gone to therapy, found faith, and become a new, better person, but I just simply don't want to. I'm so sorry I didn't wait to move on and find my future wife, have the children I always wanted." What do you mean by that?
No comment.
Explain to me why you decided to deprive Hannah and Louise of that privilege.
No comment.
What gave you the right to do that?
No comment.
What gave you the right to deprive Carol of seeing her future grandchildren?
No comment.
It's a very self-centred note and doesn't take into account anybody else. Do you agree with that?
No comment.
There's no apology to the Hunt family, is there?
No comment.
The only apology is to yourself. Do you feel that these are quite self-centred words?
No comment.
Why didn't you seek help, Kyle?
No comment.
You couldn't be bothered, is what the letter suggests. Am I wrong?
No comment.
You don't want to live your life without her. Explain that.
No comment.
But of course, you sit here in front of us and she's dead. Tell me how this has happened.
No comment.
Is your intention to make people feel sorry for you writing these letters?
No comment.
Look at your behaviour. Look how calmly and nonchalantly you walk away from that house. You've just killed 3 people and you stroll away like you're going down the shops. It wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a loss of control. You didn't go to the address and all of a sudden form this intent to kill Carol, kill Louise, kill Hannah. You'd gone there with that sole intention in mind. You went there. The CCTV footage shows throughout that you are cool, you are calm, you're collected, you're considered. There is nothing about that which suggests that you've gone there for anything else than to kill almost an entire family. I'm right in what I'm saying, aren't I, Kyle?
No comment.
Please correct me if I am completely wrong.
No comment.
As the investigation progressed, the prosecution would lay bare the chilling motive behind Clifford's actions. Their case argued that Clifford's rage and resentment following his breakup with Louise Hunt fueled a deep-seated misogyny that ultimately led to the brutal murders of Louise, her mother, and her sister. the attack was portrayed as a final, horrific act of revenge against the woman who had ended their relationship and, by extension, the women in her family. In a further disturbing revelation during the legal proceedings, it was disclosed that Kyle Clifford had also subjected his ex-partner, Louise Hunt, to a horrific act of sexual violence during the fatal attack. This additional charge of rape underscored the deeply personal and hate-filled nature of his crimes, highlighting the profound violation and suffering endured by Louise in her final moments. Facing overwhelming evidence, Kyle Clifford ultimately pleaded guilty to all 3 murders, 1 count of false imprisonment, and 2 counts of possessing offensive weapons. He also admitted guilt to the charge of raping Louise Hunt. His guilty plea avoided a lengthy and potentially even more traumatic trial for the victim's family, forcing him to accept responsibility for his heinous acts.
Well, the evidence really against Kyle Clifford was overwhelming. He had previously admitted to all the charges against him, and that was the murder of his ex-girlfriend Louise Hunt, the murder of her sister Hannah Hunt, and the murder of their mother Carol Hunt. He also admitted previously to charges of possession of 2 weapons and false imprisonment, but he had denied raping her. But over the last few days we've heard in court overwhelming evidence against Kyle Clifford, which is unanimously being accepted by the jury today. We heard that the semen was found on the body of Louise Hunt on the 9th of July, and the prosecution had very much put forward that semen was there as a result of restraining his ex-girlfriend Louise Hunt and raping her on the 9th of July in 2024. Now, the defence for Kyle Clifford had argued that DNA evidence, that forensic evidence, had been there from a prior sexual encounter between the couple 16 days previously. But the forensic evidence, the forensic pathologist who gave testimony this week here in Cambridge said it was not possible for semen to stay on the body beyond the 5 days, let alone 16 days, which was when that terrible murder of those 3 women took place in Bushey last year on the 9th of July. The prosecution, Alison Morgan, said it was completely untenable for the semen to still be on her body, and that was very much backed up by the forensic evidence from the experts who gave evidence. But Alison Morgan also said that we saw a huge degree of planning when it came to the attack. We saw CCTV footage which was shown in court of Kyle Clifford going out in the days leading up to that those brutal murders, where he was seen buying duct tape. Now, that duct tape was used in question to restrain his ex-girlfriend before raping her. He was also seen buying other objects online, but also buying them in shops relating to the murders, such as a crossbow, and online buying a knife as well. Now, the prosecution had argued that his obsession with buying those weapons, but also buying the duct tape that was fundamental to the rape of Louise Hunt, that she was tied up, and the duct tape the prosecution had put forward was used over her mouth to stop her screaming. So a really, really difficult case to hear in court today, and very difficult for the surviving family of Louise Hunt. Her father, John Hunt, the BBC racing commentator, he was in court today hearing the evidence, and there are some emotional scenes in court. There was also an applause when that guilty verdict came back from the jury of that. And this has been, obviously for the family, hugely traumatic. There have been the murders of a mother and 2 daughters, and then we've now had this guilty verdict today that Louise Hunt, who had been in an 18th month relationship with Kyle Clifford, but it was when she broke up with him 2 weeks prior to those murders on the 9th of July that the prosecution said that was motive for him to go about planning this murder of those 3 women. The prosecution said it was motivation and that he raped his ex-girlfriend as a final act of spite, and that he did it in anger because she had broken up with him 2 weeks previously, and it was almost immediately after that breakup that he began planning his attack in both the murders and also the rape that we've had now come in. And it clearly took the jury very little time at all to come with that verdict. They were out for about 45 minutes before they've come back and said that Kyle Clifford, they have found him guilty of the rape of Louise Hunt. Now, he will be sentenced on Tuesday for those 6 offences. The 6 he has previously pleaded guilty to, and the 7th one today of rape.
Alice, as you're speaking to us, we can also share with our viewers here images of the crossbow and the packaging that officers have released. This was at the centre of this attack, the crossbow that was used to kill Louise Hunt and her sister. Kyle Clifford then turned it on himself. He survived that use on himself. He is now paralysed from the waist down in a wheelchair. In fact, the case was heard in Cambridge Crown Court because it's one of the few Crown Courts with wheelchair access, but he refused to attend those proceedings. That's the crossbow. There is also images of the knife that was used as well in the stabbing of Louise Hunt's mother, Carol Hunt. Talk to us about the attack itself, because he did plead guilty to these murders, but denied the case that's being heard and had been heard today.
Yeah, and that was put forward by the defence today. They were saying the fact that Kyle Clifford had previously pleaded guilty to all those other offences against him, why would he not plead guilty to this offence today if he was in fact innocent? So that was put forward by the defence. But it was quite striking this week that he has not appeared in person to give evidence at any point. He's not been here in person to face what would have been a very difficult cross-examination, and we heard from the prosecution. It would have been questions such as, how could it have been possible for the couple to have sex 16 days prior to this violent murder, when clearly we were shown in court angry exchanges of messages between the couple. Louise Hunt was saying that he was belittling her. They'd had a huge fallout after going to a wedding, and there was clear evidence from the text messages between the couple that she was unhappy with his behaviour, so much so she broke up with him. And so the prosecution said it was not possible that they could even have had consensual sex 16 days prior to this brutal attack. So that was very much their position. But it was very striking in court, the fact that he was not here to hear any of the damning evidence against him. Now, the judge presiding over this case had urged the jury to keep a very cool head and try and look at the evidence in front of them today. Of course, what happened on the 9th of July last year was very much in not only the background, the foreground of everything that happened. And it was that degree of planning that was so important, really, to this trial. You referenced there the CCTV images we saw of him so soon after the breakup going to purchase the crossbow, and it's that crossbow that was used to murder his ex-girlfriend and his ex-girlfriend's sister. We saw him purchasing a knife, and it was that knife that was used to attack Carol Hunt. Now, it was on the day of the 9th of July when he appeared outside the family home in Bushey. He went into the house under the ruse, really, of pretending to give back some possessions that he said he had of his ex-girlfriend. And we saw in court footage of a conversation that took place between Carol Hunt and Kyle Clifford. But underneath, in disguise, he had a knife, and it was then, once he gained entry into the house, that he then killed, fatally stabbing Carol Hunt 4 or at least 5 times. And again, in court, we were shown graphic images, really, of where the stab wounds occurred. And then we heard that he waited then for his ex-girlfriend Louise Hunt, who was in fact working in the garden. She was working in a pod that she was using for her business. She did dog grooming and waited a significant time for her to come into the house, and that was because the prosecution said that they did that in order to attack her, tie her up. Her hands and feet were bound, and in order to rape her. And it was very distressing in court for the family to hear some of the detail about how that rape took place. But clearly there was the premeditation, there was the planning of it. But at the same time, the prosecution also said that whilst he was planning the attack, the buying of the crossbow and all the other items, he was also looking up pornography, and that the prosecution said that was indicative of the way in which this crime was not just planned in terms of it being a violent triple murder, it was also planned in terms of how that warped sexual fantasy of raping his ex-girlfriend was all tied up in this brutal attack on the 9th of July last year, which sadly killed 3 women. But it will be on Tuesday, not today, on Tuesday, that Kyle Clifford, who, as you say, is currently he's in a wheelchair, having tried to take his own life. There was a manhunt for him after the 9th of July last year when those brutal murders took place. But he was eventually, he was captured by police, having tried to take his own life. But he will be sentenced on Tuesday for the 3 murders of those 3 women, for false imprisonment of his ex-girlfriend, and also for possession of 2 weapons. That is the crossbow, and that was the knife used to kill Carol Hunt. He has not contested that at all. He pleaded guilty to all those offences, but today he has been found guilty of the rape of his ex-girlfriend, which the prosecution said was a final angry act of spite in terms of raping his ex-girlfriend before killing her brutally on the 9th of July last year.
To a limited extent, your age. After a trial, the sentence would have been 15 months, but I deduct 20% for your guilty plea well before trial. The surcharge provisions apply and the order can be drawn up accordingly. I make the order for the deprivation of the items on the list uploaded onto the digital case system by the prosecution, including the crossbow, your laptop and phone. The proper sentence for rape is guided by the Sentencing Council. I find the rape of Louise Hunt to fall into the highest range of the top category 1A for the reasons identified by the prosecution. There is no element of double counting, as I have to impose a concurrent sentence given the nature of the sentence for the murders. I therefore take the upper end of the range of 19 years. There is mitigation in your lack of previous convictions, but serious aggravation in the planning of the crime. I will therefore pass a sentence of 20 years imprisonment for that offence. There are no Sentencing Council guidelines currently in force for the offence of false imprisonment, and the circumstances of that offence are so intertwined with the murders that it is hard to separate them. But in any event, it has to be concurrent to the life sentences, so double counting and totality are not issues. Louise Hunt's detention was prolonged, planned, in her own home, and it falls within the Sentencing Council definition of domestic abuse. For this offence, you are also entitled to a deduction for your guilty plea. I therefore pass a sentence after that 20% reduction of 8 years imprisonment. Guidance on the imposition of the mandatory life sentence custodial term is set out in Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020. A whole life order is normally to be imposed for the murder of 2 or more people where each murder involves a substantial degree of premeditation or planning. Such a disposal is a rare one and reserved for only the most extreme cases. I have considered the guidance of the Court of Appeal in the decisions of Stewart and others, of Kigundu and Osborne. I will not add to the length of these remarks by rehearsing what is set out with great clarity in those judgments, save to highlight 2 points. First, Schedule 21 must be applied in a flexible, not rigid way to achieve a just result. Second, that although paragraph 2.2 of that schedule may have had in mind 2 murders planned then committed on separate occasions, those provisions do not exclude the most severe order being made for multiple killings on the same day. I am satisfied so that I am sure that you both planned and contemplated killing all 3 of your victims. I've already mentioned your planning. You knew the routine and habits of that household. You clearly anticipated that Carol Hunt would be in the house as you went equipped to trick your way inside. You must have known Louise Hunt would be working in the building in the garden, as you knew her routine, and she was the obvious target to be raped and murdered. You knew the routines of the household. You were there for over 4 hours and must have anticipated that Hannah Hunt would return. While you had used Louise Hunt's phone to ensure John Hunt would not be home any time soon, you made no such inquiry about Hannah. You would have known she wore a uniform for work, which she would be bound to come home to change before doing anything else in the evening. I am sure that Hannah too was part of your premeditation and that you intended to murder her if the chance presented itself. Those findings alone could lead to the imposition of a whole life term, but there are 4 further very serious aggravating factors. First, the relevant section of the schedule is triggered by, quote, the murder of 2 or more persons, I stress, or more. It seems to me the fact there were, quote, more, unquote, must be a relevant factor for a judge to have in mind. Otherwise, the courts would be saying the murder of 3 people added nothing to the sentence for the murder of 2, an unthinkable proposition. Second, the rape of Louise Hunt, of which the jury found you guilty last week, which offence was part of the same plan and the same course of conduct as the 3 killings. Third, these murders took place against a woman with whom you had been in an intimate relationship and her family, and so is within the Sentencing Council guidance on domestic abuse, which context makes crimes even more serious. Fourth, the murders of Louise and Hannah Hunt must have involved them becoming aware of the murders you had already committed, thereby inflicting dreadful mental suffering before death, a specified aggravating factor under the schedule. You have been referred to at times as a former soldier. In many cases, that would serve as significant mitigation. Not so in your case, however, as your 2 years in the army included 286 days at home claiming to be ill. You never saw active service, and your utility to the armed forces can be gleaned in a parting comment from your commanding officer that, quote, his character is wholly unsuited to military employment, and he has no care nor concern beyond himself, unquote. There are 3 matters of mitigation. First, your lack of previous convictions. Second, your relative youth, though you were already 26 years old by the time of these offences. Third, you pleaded guilty to the offences of murder, though not at the first opportunity. I have reflected on all 3 aspects. The Sentencing Council guidance makes clear there may be cases where a guilty plea should lead the court to draw back from imposing a whole life order. I have considered and rejected that course, as the factors in favour of such an order are so compelling that they far outweigh all those pieces of mitigation. I am left in no doubt that this is a sentence I must impose. The sentences I pass are therefore: for possession of an offensive weapon, the crossbow, 1 year's imprisonment, concurrent. For the possession of an offensive weapon, the knife, 1 year's imprisonment, concurrent. For the murder of Carol Hunt, life imprisonment with a whole life order, the early release provisions are not to apply. For the false imprisonment of Louise Hunt, 8 years imprisonment concurrent. For the rape of Louise Hunt, 20 years imprisonment concurrent. For the murder of Louise Hunt, life imprisonment with a whole life order. The early release provisions are not to apply. For the murder of Hannah Hunt, life imprisonment with a whole life order. The early release provisions are not to apply.
The sentencing hearing delivered a decisive outcome. Due to the extreme brutality of his crimes and the devastating impact on the Hunt family, Kyle Clifford was handed a whole life order. This means he will spend the rest of his natural life in prison and will never be eligible for parole. The judge emphasized the severity of his actions and the need to ensure he would never again pose a threat to the public. However, Clifford's paralysis from his self-inflicted wound meant that he would not be confined to a standard prison. Instead, he would remain in a hospital setting equipped to provide the necessary medical care for his condition, under strict security and the knowledge that his life behind bars would be permanent. The case of Kyle Clifford and the murder of Carol, Louise, and Hannah Hunt serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of misogyny and the tragic consequences of unchecked rage. While justice has been served, the profound loss suffered by the Hunt family and their community remains a stark testament to the devastating impact of such violent crimes. Understanding the roots and consequences of such violence is crucial. To explore more stories that delve into the darkest corners of human behavior and the pursuit of justice, be sure to subscribe to Truth and Shadows, State Crime Archive. Like this video to support our in-depth investigations, share to raise awareness of the devastating impact of violent crime, and comment below with your thoughts on this tragic case and the importance of addressing issues like misogyny and domestic violence in our society. We will continue to bring you the stories that need to be told.